Clay, I think that Harbinger, the episode that we're just about to talk about, is maybe Travis Mayweather's most insulting episode because they teased us. They teased us with a little bit of prowess that all of his rock climbing and working out and everything like that is going to pay off in his fisticuffs with the Mako. But then the Mako just unlocks Super Saiyan level 11 or whatever and actually wins the fight, and it all comes down embarrassing again for him. Mayweather looked great. He had his nice cut-off Starfleet vest. Biceps are rippling. He's doing roundhouse kicks, backflips over the guy. And then the Mako just does the face to the ground move, which is unstoppable in Star Trek lore, I suppose.
Yeah, apparently they learned their fight techniques from Tekken 3, I think.
Yes, yeah. Is that once the fighters moved into the three-dimensional realm instead of just a side-scrolling thing, that's where Mayweather fell off a little bit. He couldn't sweep the leg from that angle.
Yeah, they had those really cool windmill kicks and stuff and roundhouses in that game. It was a cool game.
Pretty I kind of like I'm not going to really talk about this in the episode itself, but I kind of like the fight choreography in this. I like the way they filmed that good scene. It actually wasn't too bad, the sparring that they were doing with each other. I want to give props to the stunt coordinator who did all that, because I thought it came out pretty well, all things considered. In a sequence that could have been awful, I thought that came out pretty good.
Yeah, I think Reed's hand positions when he's in his fight stance are a little bit suspect, because he was just kind of like holding them together like some sort of little English Dracula.
I got a lot to say about Reed, so we'll save it for the main show. But let's take a break. We're going to be talking about Harbinger of Sorrow. Right after this, we'll take a break, play a clip from it, and then we'll come back and break it down.
I'm Captain Archer.
You had no right to bring me here.
We were trying to save your life.
I didn't ask for your help. Return me to my ship.
Your vessel has minimal life support. You wouldn't last too long if we took you back.
That's none of your concern.
Harbinger is the 15th episode of the third season of Star Trek Enterprise. Came out on February 11th, 2004. It is 16 out of 28 in the Xindi Crisis arc. Teleplay goes to Manny Koto. Story credit goes to Rick Berman and Brandon Braga. Directed by David Livingston. In-universe date is December 27th, 2153, just after Christmas and Boxing Day for our British listeners. In this episode, Enterprise rescues an alien from a massive spatial anomaly, but its lone pilot refuses to explain why he was there. Reed and Hayes confront each other over their roles on the ship. Harbinger. I think we have Patreon comments later, Clay, that are going to say that you, as a longtime unfan or a non-fan of the story while the ship is traveling somewhere, you have a couple episodes of the ship traveling somewhere as they're trying to get to this red giant planet or a star or whatever to solve something. But Harbinger is the first step in that process. What'd you think of this one?
I actually really like this.
I like this episode a lot. I think.
Yeah. I do have to say, Brandon, can we just send Manny Koto straight to the top? Because the man has the best interests of the show at heart, clearly. And I think he deserves everything that's coming to him. Promote this man to showrunner for season 4.
I was waiting for your joke about send him straight to the top because he shows us the bottom, which is... I don't think...
Did I pass out? Did I dream this episode? Because this ticks all my boxes, if you know what I'm saying.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I don't think this is a great episode or anything, but my big takeaway from this one is that I feel that this is almost what Enterprise was begging to be from the start, which is, I haven't realized it till now, but it's like a WB level melodrama. You know what I mean? And this one's like, it's cheesy. It's got a little bit of corny. I think that some of the plot lines are like outright silly in some ways, but I think the melodrama and the overly emotional aspect of this actually work well in the context of being a prequel for this series. Like the fighting and the fucking and everything that's going on is like extremely high school and goofy, and you don't think that trained adults in space would be acting this way or anything, but I think it reflects well on humanity before they get to like the TNG style of culture and stuff like that. I thought this was like weirdly soothing and easy to watch, and also kind of fun while being silly and hammy and stupid at the same time.
Yeah, you don't expect you're not expecting adults to act this way, and thankfully they don't need some sort of space spore or something to get them to act that way. It's just like, this is how people in close proximity are going to act eventually.
Yeah.
There was a lot of elements that I wish they had done earlier. Like, I was kind of surprised it took them, what was this, episode 11 or something?
This is 15 of the third season.
15? Wow. Yeah. The stuff with the Makos, I feel like that story, I've been waiting for that storyline since episode 1 of season 3.
I would say this is episode 2, because episode 1 is Reed going, God damn, this guy Hayes, I fucking hate him. And there was no follow-up until 14 episodes later.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not really like motivated by much, except for the fact that they are going somewhere. I don't know. Like, the motivation for that fight is not, unless I am forgetting something, it's not really anything important.
It's all in their heads. It's all in Reed's head, basically.
Right.
Reed comes across in this episode to me as completely unhinged and a psychopath.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you know, like that storyline feels like it's really natural in episode 2 or episode 3, where he's feels threatened by the Makos and whatnot. I think that it's a natural progression of those characters being put in the same environment with each other, that I'm shocked it took them this long to get to.
Yeah.
And even the stuff with T'Pol and Trip, I liked. I actually think they've been building to this fairly well, by not really leaning into it too much. And even here, when they kind of cross the threshold, so to speak, it's not just like they're together now kind of thing. It's like, it's just another step forward in this weird kind of relationship that they're not really having, but are also having kind of thing.
Yeah.
I will say the one thing that I feel is out of place, and it's a shame, because I think if this were season 2 or something, he would actually fit in really well. I think Angry Archer is very out of place in this episode.
Yeah, go ahead. I would agree, but I think that the whole Archer Xindi storyline feels out of place compared to the rest of what's going on, and that's the problem. Like, before you give your thoughts, the Xindi storyline here is really interesting to me, because I think we get the most information we've ever had in the Xindi storyline, and it's done in a fairly interesting way. And then you get this big reveal that something else is at play in the Xindi arc. Like, there's some other species that's trying to pull strings to get things to happen. And it's actually, to me, the least interesting arc in the story for some reason, which is really weird. And Archer, I think, fits into that, because it's just angry Archer being angry for no real reason. And I also don't think that the Archer does a lot of good detective work to solve the thing at the end when he shakes the guy and he's like, I know that you know what you're doing. I don't buy that he knew what that guy was doing.
Yeah, no, that stuff. Yeah, I mean, even I understand that the idea is that this is he's supposed to be, that this alien guy is supposed to be the Herald of Galactus here.
Yep.
But even still, it's like it's a question that has no answer. It's just got a foreboding sort of ellipses at the end of it, and Archer is just playing it the way he's played everything else this season, which feels like overwrought. And when the rest of the episode is kind of light, or at least it's messier, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's like a messier character stuff going on. That kind of Scott Bakula trying to play angry captain just feels really out of place. I think there was one scene that I liked where he was, the first scene with Phlox, where he's trying to get Phlox to like wake him up and stuff. I thought he was fairly convincing in that one, but
interesting. I think he's most convincing when he's chewing out Reed and Hayes at the end. I thought
that was fine.
You thought it was okay? Maybe it doesn't have the impact just because the Hayes and Reed thing is not really. the lightness of that, the sort of goofiness of that storyline doesn't really lend itself to Archer being so pissed off at them in a way.
Right.
Like, I understand why Archer should be pissed off, but I completely agree with you that Archer's overwrought anger about literally everything in these episodes it undoes scenes like that, which is like those two fighting is goofy, you know? And so Archer being so pissed off, while it makes sense in terms of the narrative, doesn't really feel appropriate for him. And maybe it's the same because I feel the same about when he's trying to tell Phlox to wake the guy up and he doesn't care if it kills him because he's got stuff he needs to know from him. It just felt a little bit too much for me at all those times. I think every Archer scene in this feels like it's a little bit too much for me.
Yeah, and that scene where he chews them out comes at kind of a weird place too, because it comes after the sequence. If I remember correctly, it comes after the sequence where the
alien goes and attacks the engine room.
Where the alien runs through the engine room. Because that feels like it would happen. Normally, that would happen before the alien running through the ship, and then the alien running through the ship is what breaks that scene up.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if Archer was like, Phlox tells me that you have intense lacerations on your faces. What's that from? I'd be like, it was from the alien that ran through the ship trying to subdue the alien. It was definitely not me punching his ass in the face. You know, like it feels like it needs to be. He gets in their faces about because like their fight didn't cause anything bad to happen.
No.
I feel like
rescuing the alien kind of triggers their friendship there, where I understand what you're saying, which is that when Archer confronts them, they should kind of be aligned as a team at that point, where they deceive Archer into, they work as a team to not be in as much trouble with Archer at the end. Yeah.
Or if you're going to place it there in the story, I think whatever their problem with each other has to directly cause something bad to happen.
Right.
Where, you know what I mean? So like at that point, he's like, you guys got to get your shit together because you are in this stupid dick measuring contests and we almost lost the ship because you two couldn't work together, which is, it's the lethal weapon kind of thing.
Yeah.
But they're like past that point at this point where they get chewed out. So it's just, it's one of those things where I feel like you want to have that scene, but like structurally it makes more sense to go from them fighting directly into this action beat or whatever. I can understand maybe why they chose to put it there. It's probably not the best place for it, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. I think that this episode reminds me a lot of Breaking the Ice in the first season, which is the Comet episode that we liked quite a bit.
Sure.
Because it's, I guess my pushback to your thing about the sort of the structure of those scenes mattering in the long term is that the reason we liked Breaking the Ice, and I think the reason I like this one, is because they're like interestingly meandering in a way that a lot of Enterprise episodes are not, where a lot of Enterprise episodes feel so rote and preconceived and structural that there's no time to just hang out here. And I was really shocked by watching this episode. Just makes me realize how little the crew hangs out with each other in a way.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see them do it. I think you get insights into some characters. Like, I wasn't even really kidding. Reed is basically a psychopath of a character on this show. He's completely unhinged. And his performance, the way that when Archer gives him the very mild news that this guy's going to run some training things, and he starts chewing his jaw starts going like he's got an entire pack of Big League Chew in his mouth. And it's like, what is wrong with this guy? To the point of Hayes is sort of nice to him and accommodating, and he's just so pissed off about this imaginary threat to his job that things are going to go down. Then they get into an incredibly homoerotic Hot Shots-esque Top Gun fist fight with each other, and it's all just so, he's such a crazy loon of a character. And then I think the topper is when he's having dinner with Trip after Trip has told him that he's been giving massages to every woman on board. And he gets angry at everybody. He's angry at like DePaul, he's angry at Trip, and then they do the stupid riff on the Pulp Fiction joke, which Pulp Fiction did a million times better. But he's so strange of a character, and we've never had episodes show us how weird of a character Malcolm Reed is until this point in time. It's unfortunate that it takes this long to learn these much about these guys.
Yeah, it's almost like you get to know characters by watching their interactions with other characters on the show.
Yeah, I know. Again, I don't think this episode is great, but this is an extremely unusual one, I guess. You'd have to agree with that, or would you say it's not that unusual?
I think it's unusual for this show.
Sure.
I don't think it's an unusual episode of television. Let's put it that way.
Sure, I'd agree with that. Yeah,
the plots that it's dealing with are fairly routine. You've got a semi love triangle thing going on, and then you've also got the guy, the buddy cop kind of thing going on. They're not reinventing the wheel here, but they are employing different types of stories that they have not done on this show. Because I'm not, at this point, 3 seasons in, I'm not really sure what kind of show this wants to be.
Yeah. Well, would you want this show to be my thing? What I was saying, like a really WB. I know this was on UPN, but I associate UPN and WB. Remember that tone? WB?
They are actually the same channel, I think, more or less.
Did one buy or absorb the other one at some point?
WB turned into UPN.
So
because I know that only because Buffy started on WB and ended on UPN. So
okay.
I think they kind of morphed into the other.
Well, those networks had a real tone, like Seventh Heaven.
Oh, definitely.
What comes to mind, and Buffy sort of comes to mind, and Enterprise was on there and stuff like that. But I think at this point in Enterprise, I'm really looking for any way that if I were called into this series at this point to how I would make this different from the other Trek series, where I think its main flaw now is that it's extremely redundant of other Trek series and it's not really trying to do anything. I would have wholeheartedly embraced, if I had seen this episode, I'd be like, we have to wholeheartedly embrace this nonsense melodrama stuff. Like this is the only thing that I think really works well and is extremely unique for the series, and I think it actually works in the context of a prequel. Like this episode would seem horrible on TNG and it would seem cheesy on DS9. I think it works in Enterprise. Would you say that you'd want more of this tone, or is this just something they have to space into the series? Do you think it would become overbearing after a while?
I think this is a good way to go, because especially given the overall tone of this plot that they're dealing with is so dark, but they are not really giving in to the darkness of it. They're still trying to, have their Enterprise cake and eat it too. So I think especially with something like this, where it's like, okay, now they've got a destination they're going towards, and it's going to take them 3 weeks or whatever to get there. I think now is a good time to start leaning into this stuff where you get a little bit of cabin fever stuff going on. Because like I think that would be the most interesting part of this series from a prequel standpoint, is like, sure, this is a Starfleet ship, but nobody on Earth has ever been in space for this long, out this far. Shit's going to happen. It's going to be messy. It's going to be weird. And I welcome that stuff, mainly because, as we were saying, you get more character out of it. Like there's just so much more interesting stuff going on when you've got these characters interacting with each other, to the point that we were like, yeah, this sci-fi plot, we don't really give a shit about the sci-fi plot.
The main backbone of the season too, about learning about this.
I want to know how the Mako girl feels about T'Pol and Trip giving each other back massages.
I agree. I would agree with that. That's probably a big statement.
I'm Team Angela. What the hell's her name?
That Mako,
Carol?
the female Cole, right? Mako Cole is all I know.
I'm Team Cole right now. Trip, if T'Pol's going to shut you down and ice you like that, Cole seems very nice. She seems to actually have an interest in you, and not just because and she seems to have more access to her feelings in a way that T'Pol doesn't, because she's a Vulcan and has to repress that stuff. But I'm sure that's going to come up later. I'm just saying, she seems very nice. You can do. I'm not going to say you can do better than T'Pol, but you gotta know when it's time.
I mean, those FSU girls, I guess Trip would be familiar with. Do you like? I I see a way of saying that this is actually another one of these weirdly insulting to Paul episodes where they don't have her rubbing her breasts in Archer's face, right? Which is one level of embarrassing to Paul. But what they do have is a very junior high love story going on, right? And I don't think this story probably what's that test that they do for female characters?
Oh, the Bechdel test.
Bechdel. There's probably like, what's the definition of that? It's two female characters have a scene and they don't talk about a man. I think that's the definition of it.
Yeah, you don't pass the Bechdel test if your female characters only talk about men when they talk to each other.
Right. And I think there's only the one scene that they interact and they talk about Trip in that episode.
Right.
So
yeah.
I don't think that test is the end all be all test of a literary device or anything like that. But there is a childishness to this story that does seem somewhat insulting. However, I would argue that it's not particularly insulting to Paul because everyone is under the microscope of this tone in this episode. Like everyone is kind of stupid in this.
Right.
So I don't find it targeting her really. And I also think that it saves it a bit. By the end is kind of dark where she turns it around on Trip out of a kind of animosity towards him. Like there's an anger about, you made me feel bad because of the Marine. I'm going to say that this was just a science experiment that I did with you. Mm-hmm. And that I thought that was neat just because it's a definitely, they play it kind of comedic, but it's definitely a dark interaction that those two have, or that's the sense that I got from it. Did you have anything different from that, or did you think it was more of a comedic little comedy beat at the end of the story?
I don't know if I necessarily thought it was dark, but I did feel like it was the right move because I don't know if I consider this insulting to Paul. Well, I don't know. It's a tough call because I think it's not insulting if you're taking into account the fact that she doesn't know how to handle these emotions that she's dealing with. If that is the case, like I don't know what her romantic history is on Vulcan.
We actually don't know. They don't really get into it. So about whether or not this is a Vulcan. Maybe they will going forward, but they don't really get into what her main beef is beyond her sort of like that criticism I always have about her lack of Vulcanship gets in the way because she feels emotions that I think a better Vulcan would not be feeling, you know?
Yeah, like I don't mind her getting tripped up because she's jealous and she's, you know, not supposed to feel jealousy, but she does. That kind of, like I don't mind that stuff. I think that stuff works fine. And I think it's a natural and good endpoint in this episode because she clearly doesn't know how to handle what's going on. So she has to fall back on the scientific leg of it. Right. So to speak. So like they're not going to start holding hands and stuff. And the only way she can figure out how to deal with it is to, you know, take a step back and be like, no, this was just, you know, I was just doing Vulcan research.
Yeah. She's not going to show weakness to Trip in the way that he is.
Right.
He's kind of putting his heart on his sleeve and she is not going to do that for him. And
he also earlier in the episode slyly implies maybe they should have a three-way.
Yes.
Which she wisely shoots down, but
can't blame a man for trying, I suppose. There's a lot of euphemisms around the Vulcan neuro. Like the show obviously knows that that's what they're kind of hinting at. They're always, when they're doing it, they're like, let's change position. Reed is saying that this is so intimate. How about why won't you give a man a Vulcan neuropressure test or whatever?
If this show wanted to be taken seriously, Trip would give Malcolm the neuropressure and those two would fall in love.
Right there in front of everybody, right over those mashed potatoes or whatever the hell he was shoveling into his mouth. Yeah, the scene that I most liked, because I thought it was kind of cute in a writing way, was the one where the scene where they end in them having sex, or at least you seeing T'Pol's bare ass in the camera. I thought that was fairly
that's another one where they should have all things should have been equal, and they should have made Trip bare ass in that one too.
Infinite.
That's why you don't write for the show, Clay.
Infinite asses and infinite combinations is the motto of the Vulcans. I like that scene on a writing standpoint. I thought that was fairly clever in a way that a lot of Enterprise scenes aren't, mostly because they don't have time to do anything like that. But the way that she turns it around on him, where he starts out with the upper hand of being like, I'm accusing you of being jealous, and she easily flips it around on him, and he's embarrassed, and then ends by going, what the hell are we talking about at this point? I thought that was cute. I like that stuff. I thought that was a well-written scene.
I also really liked how dry she was when she was talking about having learned about his feelings by talking to his clone.
Yeah.
And she's just saying things so matter-of-factly, and he's like, okay.
He goes,
so I guess am I jealous of myself now?
He goes, what the hell was he doing in your room? Which is the line.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty funny. Yeah, and it's just being jealous of himself. And I think it's kind of neat that you learn about Trip, that Trip is open to his feelings. Like he doesn't hide how he's feeling. When he realizes what he's feeling by being tricked into thinking about it because it's T'Pol, he readily admits to it too, which is nice. And she's the opposite. In some ways, they have almost inverted gender stereotypes about how they're supposed to handle stuff like that, where she plays the male role with the sort of closed off emotionality, and Trip is the more open and emotional one of the two.
Yeah, it's a nice dynamic. I'm so glad that they decided to go this route instead of T'Pol and like Archer or something. Yeah. Because I just don't. Well, first of all, I feel like he's considerably older than her.
Yeah, I mean, he's so angry. He'd be slapping her around and stuff like that at this point. Yeah, so he's got to take his anger out somehow, and he is much older and more boring.
But Trip is, he is such a much more interesting foil for T'Pol, because he always has been fairly open emotionally. And obviously it just makes sense to pair those two together, the one who's kind of open emotionally and the one who's very closed off emotionally.
Yeah.
I was just kind of circling back to Reed for a second. I was kind of hoping when I think T'Pol is talking about how intense Reed can be, and he's like, he ate the same thing for dinner 3 meals every day, the same food. I was hoping it would be 2, 3, 4 pineapple pizza.
They're not going back that far. They're not going to go dig deep into the annals of what we know about Reed, I guess, at this point. Yeah, Reed, I don't have much else to say about that storyline. I agree with you that the conflict is so ethereal and non-real that it if you think about it, it's kind of weird. It makes him seem even more insane than I think that he is. But I generally just like the fact that they brought the Makos into it again and had them actually interact with the crew in a way and do something. I don't think there's too much else out of that. And even I think the resolution is kind of pat. Like once they realize that there's a threat to the ship, they become united, and Archer yells at them and they say that it's over and they're going to be friends now and everything like that. So it's a weird. Sorry.
I just want to say I did really like the end of that scene when Archer leaves and then Reed goes, "Are we dismissed?
Are we dismissed? We have to stand here." I don't think. I think that that's a weird story that if you poke around at it, there's literally nothing holding it up. There's no skeleton to that whatsoever. Yeah. But it was just kind of fun and stupid and silly. And I think that there's room for Reed and there's room for that kind of personality on the ship. And it's good that they had a chance to take him out and spin his wheels a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there could have been plenty holding it up, but because I think you could argue
Hayes would have to be more sinister, I think. And that's
I was going to say you could do this story in like episode 2 or 3, but I think you could argue that this is the blow off for something that you've been building to for 15 episodes.
Yes,
every now and then you kind of touch back on this, but it's not what they do. They just throw these two together out of the blue, and it's like it's a refreshing. It works despite that there's no setup. Like a lot of the stuff in this works despite no setup. Like the T'Pol and Trip stuff, they've been building to for a while, but like
the girl comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, the girl comes out of nowhere. It was a nice twist though in that opening scene where they kind of pan up and it's a different woman. It's not T'Pol.
Yep.
And I also like that I'm assuming he's not doing it right on her because of some subconscious thing or whatever.
Oh, interesting. I just think he sucks at it. Yeah, I just
that's possible too. I mean,
yeah.
it could be that he's just bad at it. I mean, maybe that comes out when T'Pol and Trip have their inevitable blow up argument. She's like, "And you were never even good at the pressure point thing. I was faking it the whole time."
And Phlox's weird matchmaker continues to be there, where he basically does the Shaggy, like, caught her banging on the bathroom floor to T'Pol. Like, she came in and they've been doing Vulcan neuropressure to each other. I'm aware of this. What do you think about that? Oh, well.
Did they sleep together? Did Trip and Cole sleep together?
No, I don't think so. There's no indication that happened.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if they were trying to be coy with it or not, but it feels like they were just sort of like flirting with each other.
She leaves after the neuropressure scene together in the beginning.
Right, but I wasn't totally sure if maybe the implication, because of how familiar they were in the training sequence, is if like they had been spending time together since then.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm not. I guess maybe a more adult show would have had to delve into that. I didn't get that impression. I think we're pretty early. It's like it's another junior high thing where he's just kind of talking to her and T'Pol is overreacting to it.
Yeah. I think if Trip actively sleeps with somebody else, it's a little bit too adult for what they're going for.
They were on a break. I like T'Pol's line, "You touched her, she touched your bottom," or whatever she says, touched her behind. So before we sign off, let's just touch again on the Xindi storyline, because it is the backbone of the season, and we clearly in this episode thinks it's the least important part of this episode. They find a little device in the middle of a bunch of anomalies colliding with each other that are all equidistant from 5 spheres. So this is like the sphere. They seem to be implying that the spheres are creating the anomalies, which we know, but that they're also intentionally focusing their energy to do something, and they're testing out whatever that thing is going to do with it. So they send in this alien to test it to see what would happen. And the Enterprise finds him. Archer yells at him a little bit, and then the guy tries to blow up the Enterprise, and then he reveals at the end that he is from a species that is trying to get the Xindi to destroy Earth, because that is a win for them as a people.
Sure.
As I said, this is the most information we've gotten about the Xindi arc, I think, in an episode. Like the reveal that there's something else is kind of a big reveal. You learn more about the spheres. You learn that those religious zealots in the previous episode were actually right about something. Their faith is based in some kind of fact, or at least they understand something that's going on. So it feels like it's big. Have we already talked about why we don't feel that it feels that way, or do you think that there's something we missed here for why this feels like such a letdown, even though it's the most Xindi-esque information dump we've had to this point, and we were begging for Xindi information dumps?
Yeah, I don't really know. I think maybe because whatever this is still pretty vague. It's also a very long shot of a plan that I can't believe worked, that they plugged this guy into this giant cluster of anomaly stuff. Specifically, I am assuming he was put there for the purpose of the Enterprise's finding him.
I don't know. I legitimately think he's there to test what it's like to live in that environment for whatever reason.
Oh, so you don't think that him trying to destroy the Enterprise was like part of the plan?
That's a good question. I think maybe it was part of the plan.
Because if that was the plan, that's like a bad guy in Skyfall level of coincidences need to happen.
Yeah, I think that's the general problem with the plot of that story, or the way that plot shakes out. Everything that happens doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense to me about why it's happening. Like whether or not this guy is in on it from the beginning. If he's not in on it from the beginning, why does he suddenly decide to destroy the ship? And that doesn't make a lot of sense because they're trying to help him. Is Phlox dead at the end of this episode?
That was intense. He got like phantom knifed through the neck or something. I'm not sure what happened. The
guy's also destroying computer systems as he's walking through them. So did he like just break his neck when he put his arm through him? Because
Yeah,
he
I don't
collapsed
know.
like he broke his neck. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it only works on computers.
We'll have Flux Sim next episode, I guess. But I think that's the problem with it. It's another Xindi arc that's it's not really clear what's going on. It feels somewhat effective just because they're telling you that something's going on. And I like the ending about revealing that information, even if I think it's kind of cheesy that Archer figured it out somehow. I think it's just. It's a lot of information, but at the same time, as you say, it's vague and it doesn't really, it's not novel in a way that's interesting compared to the rest of the episode, which is actually novel in how they're treating these character interactions with each other. This one just felt, I don't know, it felt flat to me. I was just surprised by that.
Yeah, and it doesn't have that mid-season of 24 kind of stark step up thing. Where the first half of 24, first half of the season, Jack Bauer's chasing this one guy, and then he finally gets him at the halfway point, and it's at that point that he realizes, oh shit, it's actually the president who's behind everything.
Yes, it's the head of my agency has been behind pulling the strings the entire time.
Yeah, it doesn't have that because there thus far has been no resolution with the Xindi, nor has there been a really satisfying anything so much with the Xindi. So adding another sort of vague, larger thing.
Well, this guy's a sphere builder, right? Is that what you take away from it?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't see his labor union card, but
it's a strong union. It's hard to tell who's in it. I think he's I have to assume he's a sphere builder that is, and this is sort of there's some DS9 episode where they sent in, what did they do? They sent in a Vorta or something, and then the Vorta reveals.
I don't want you to say anything bad about Sphere Builders 101, okay?
This felt to me like
the 205. The 205, those guys are all assholes.
It's an episode of The Irishman all of a sudden. I felt that this was like that DS9 episode where I think it was a Vorta came on before people knew what a Vorta was. And then when it's revealed that they're a part of it at the end, it's supposed to be a realization that you've been in contact with the Dominion at that point.
Sure.
I think I would have to guess this guy is supposed to be a sphere builder character. And
yeah,
I have to assume that he's telling the truth, that he doesn't come from real space. He's from some trans-dimensional universe or something that he says. So we learned that, I guess. I don't know if that... I'm just saying that to your point of you feel that in 24 they would have a mid-season flip. I feel like this was supposed to be, but they almost don't tell you enough information about it to get that point across.
Yeah, I think that's the problem is that I don't think it needs to be a hard flip, but I feel like the main plot hasn't really justified this widening out of the circle. Even though they've kind of been, I guess they've clearly been intending to do something because the spheres have been there for the whole season.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like they're missing a step, or maybe it's the fact that it is so vague still that it's not totally coalescing. It's not making me go, oh,
well,
that's crazy.
Yeah, well, I think this ultimately comes back to the problem with the Xindi, right? If they're saying that there's another species that's playing the Xindis and humans against each other, when we come to terms with the Xindi, as I assume must happen when we work together to defeat this other group, I'm not going to feel that was a very big flip because we don't know anything about the Xindi at this point, you know?
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
Joining up with them is not really... If this was like the Cardassians or something where you've seen examples of how horrible of a people they are in their private lives, it kind of means something to join forces with them like they do at the end of DS9. And this doesn't have that. And I think it's a big problem, I think, is that the Xindi continue to not really be a character or a species at all.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if this is sort of is this going to be like a sidestep of the Xindi where it's like the Xindi isn't quite working, so we got to bring Galactus into the mix?
As you say, the spheres have been there from the beginning, so it feels a little bit protected from that.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% convinced that it's working.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. We'll take a break. We'll play a clip from the episode, which is Harbinger, and then we'll come back. We'll read some patron thoughts and give our final thoughts about Harbinger.
It wasn't you. It was your clone. Sim told me.
Sim?
He said he had feelings for me.
He told you that?
Standing right there.
What the hell was he doing in your room?
Your voice is tensing up.
Well, now you're the vocal expert.
I don't need to be an expert to read you.
I can't believe this. I'm jealous of myself.
You're jealous?
No, absolutely not.
Thank you very much for listening to the show today. Thank you for listening to our coverage of Harbinger. I just like saying that word. I always thought it was Harbinger, but it's Harbinger.
One who brings har.
Brings some har. Brings it har and hardcore. Thank you very much for listening.
I once, when I was younger, I came across a movie at the video store it was a sequel to the 80s horror movie Warlock. It was called Warlock the Armageddon.
Yep.
And I kept referring to it as Warlock the Armageddon.
Sure.
To the point where my dad was like, Clay, it's Armageddon. You're saying it wrong. You sound like an idiot.
If you're big into reggae, you'd pronounce it Armageddon, I think would be the way that at least those are all
well, Armageddon is my favorite subset of reggae music.
He's my favorite Godzilla villain. Thank you for supporting us. If you want to support the show.
You've never seen Sean Paul and Armageddon at Hempfest?
Patreon.com/The Penske File is the place to go to support us. A couple dollars a month, you get extra stuff like extra podcasts. We're going to be covering, I think it's Battlestar this month is what we're covering, the miniseries. So if you're excited about that, we'll do parts 1 and 2 of the miniseries on Patreon this month. It's probably actually already out by the time that this episode comes out, but you get 1 and 2 of those. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff on the Patreon. There's like 100 podcasts now. If you sign up and support us,
look at that.
Get there. And I think that's it. We dropped below the Voyager goal, Clay, recently.
Oh,
I think
no.
It might change, but this is the kind of walking the tightrope that you people are playing with by dropping off.
This is more exciting than GameStop.
It really is.
There's a reference that's already old.
This is GameStop mixed with Deal or No Deal. Just two of the pinnacles of the last couple of years of culture. Anyway, patreon.com/The Penske File. Captain Tier supporters.
Does that show exist anymore? Deal or No Deal?
No, I don't think so. If it does, it's in that phase of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where they have weird hosts on it all the time.
Since the syndicated version, where it's like Katie Couric's understudy is hosting
sister-in-law or something is on there. Deal or No Deal was one of the worst game shows I've ever seen.
I remember watching it thinking like, this is people watch this.
Game shows went into this weird thing where they moved away from actually being games to being, how can we amplify emotional excitement for as long as possible?
Sure.
While someone makes a decision to do something, and I hate that.
Well, what's interesting about it actually is that show really came into prominence, I think, when we were in college.
Yes,
and I had a media class that I was taking where we were talking about game shows. I think we watched Quiz Show and we talked about all that kind of stuff. And the teacher broke down game shows in a way that I had never considered before. And when I saw Deal or No Deal, I was like, oh my God, this is the like synthesis, like just the straining down purest version of what he was talking about, which is that on game shows, people don't care about the game.
Mm-hmm.
They care about the money.
Sure.
It's the money on the line and the possibility of winning or losing the money, which is the thing that drives the tension. It's not whether or not you know the capital of Syria or whatever.
Right,
you know?
Yeah.
And so Deal or No Deal just strips everything else away and is a game that is literally about whether or not your next choice gives you money or takes your money away.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it was a huge hit.
Yeah, maybe I'm in the minority then, because I really like the game shows that are game based.
Oh, sure. I mean, like those are obviously more fun, but it's the tension is the money.
Yeah, is the point.
The fingers mean the money, as they say.
A show that reminded me of that was I think I'm remembering this right. The first show that really struck me as that's what they were doing was like, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Sure, yeah.
where they must ask like 3 questions over the course of a half hour in that game, but the most of it is just like people acting in disbelief that they don't know something like as simple as that. It just seems so hokey, and you're just sitting there going like, can you guys ask another question just so I can see what's happening in this game? But anyway, you can have our Patreon podcast about game shows and our favorite game shows available on patreon.com/Well,
I think that kind of shows you the game shows that don't have that don't focus in on those stakes are usually the ones that don't last very long. It's the ones where it's like aside from like dating shows, people seem to love dating shows. But,
yes, yeah.
But yeah, the game shows that are overly complex and are more about the game than they are about the money, I don't think make the impact, except for Whose Line Is It Anyway, where nothing is real and the points don't matter. Everybody loves that show.
I'd agree with you. Special thank you to our patrons, the Captain Tier patrons, Tarek Latif, Samuel Custer, Joint Mango, Kyle Barat, Mike Burnett, Andrew Cherlog, Matthew Ross, Michael Pond, Matthew Cutler, Christian Pouch.
That's BAR''H.
Yes, BA''RAHD with all caps on the second one. Christian Pouch, Nick Sergey, Cardinal Doomsday, Grim Santo, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Kevin Reyes, Vault 13 Hero, Jordan Cooper, Darth Mosk, Russell Elledge, HH28, Stephen Minton, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jake123, Point Extra G, Johnny Franceschi, Captain Brazen, Eric Antoine, JK's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Corey Martin, Nick the Rat, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Garoppolo John Zorn, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Dave Davies, Retail, Tom Hickey, Jose Hunters, EWNF Remixes, Patrick Seba, Captain Munchausen, Beal, I think it's Beal, James McLennan, Jonas Lokai, Matt Houston, and Tuvix Must Die, and Olivier Pardue. Thank you very much for supporting the show. We much appreciate it.
What is also unfortunate about us recording this far out is we can't really talk about and have anybody know what we're talking about, how we kind of got into a fight with a Dave Davies of the Kinks fan account on Twitter.
No, I've been given a hard time to what seems like a very sweet person who runs a Dave Davies fan club on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't a fight, but it was just funny. They were very, very adamant that the Dave Davies who subscribes to our Patreon was not, in fact, Dave Davies from the Kinks. And we have yet to see any proof that what they believe is true.
No, I need proof. I'm not going to willing to take this random person on Twitter's word that this is not celebrity Dave Davies supporting us for $10 a month on Patreon. I don't believe it.
He seems to be a huge Star Trek fan, so.
That's right. It was all sparked by Tark showing us that Dave Davies was tweeting about Star Trek. So we'll see. It's a mystery. It's like the spheres of this season of Enterprise.
Could you imagine how we'd be doing in that Patreon if we got the Davies bump? If you retweeted us?
Just by not even retweeting, if just by the fan club Twitter interacting with us will attract thousands of people. All right, that's it. Thank you very much for supporting us on Patreon. Let's move on to patron thoughts. There's only a couple for this episode, which I thought was interesting. First one says, or Matthew Ross says, Harbinger, just in case you don't remember the Xindi, here's a 2-minute recap ending with a sexy massage. We didn't mention this. This Previously On is the weirdest Previously On I've ever seen of any show.
It was like the show had a stroke. Usually you can kind of guess what the episode's going to be about, or like what the things are going to be, what elements are going to pop up based on these things. I had no fucking clue.
It was bringing up everything.
It
was bringing up literally everything that's happened. I laughed when it actually connected, but I was like, why are they bringing up Sim in this? Like, there's no reason to bring him up, and it actually did come in. Yeah. Brandon, let's get to Paul. Or is that Brandon? I think he means Brandon. Brandon, let's get to Paul and the mate go naked and oiled, and they just pawn fire it up, and Trip and Trip can join in. Interesting that T'Pol's outfit with the Mako covers every last crevice, while she's holding her boobs for Trip or just being naked. As to Reed and Hayes' interdepartmental rivalry, we see this dick wagging in other military shows, but Archer chewing them out continues his angry, though here justifiable turn. Oh, and the alien guy is in the blob, and he can walk through walls. Hell of a long way to hurt the Enterprise. 3 sexy times out of 5.
Did you think that I was expecting in the scene where T'Pol was doing the pressure point stuff on Cole, I was expecting Cole to play it a little bit more like she was hoping to get out of there because clearly she's not there for the pressure point
Right, like
therapy.
T'Pol is sort of ordering her there, but she doesn't want to go because it's awkward. You mean?
Yeah, or just like the reason that she was doing this in the first place with Trip was so she could spend time with Trip.
You're right.
Not because she actually wanted him to do this pressure point garbage.
Sure, yeah. I was a little surprised that the Mako was not picking up on what T'Pol was putting down. You know, I would have thought that there was tension there that wasn't utilized or something, but I don't know.
It did make me think, though, the fact that she was playing it fairly straight, maybe she did just want help with her back.
Maybe. Yeah.
And, you know, the Trip stuff is a byproduct, but like maybe she's actually going back to T'Pol because T'Pol's doing it right and it's actually helping her back out.
Yeah, we're walking into dangerously close into like 90s lesbian leaving a man territory, I think, where she's like, you know, T'Pol just massages my third vertebra in a way that Trip never could. Kyle Barat says, I remember back in the TNG days when Clay would complain about storylines that happened on the way to something more interesting, so I hope he's prepared for 4 episodes charting the journey to Azadi Prime. Considering it basically just shoves a bunch of disparate stories together, Harbinger is surprisingly great because it focuses on character. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Trip and T'Pol's relationship, and Malcolm's conflict with Hayes hasn't been mentioned since the premiere, the episode nails the often humorous interactions between the characters better than ever before. It's a shame that when It's a shame then that Mayweather's biggest role all season is getting beaten up, but the fight scenes are enjoyably brutal with a few campy 2S moves mixed in. And though Reed is fighting Hayes, what he actually wants to do is tickle his belly button from the inside. 4 slaps on the arse out of 5.
Jesus.
I did. Their scenes with each other, because there's so little actual plot driving those two to hate each other, it does feel like they're just going to start making out after they fight for a little bit, you know?
Again, if this was a braver show, they would have done that.
Yeah.
I do.
Why are you
I do
picking
kinda,
on me, Reed? Why won't you let me love you?
I do kind of wish that they had just done the beat where Mayweather ends up sparring with a dude and just totally wrecks him, and everyone was like, "Holy shit!
Why does this guy fly the ship?" Yeah.
Do anybody else know he could do that?
Mayweather adopts his military name, which is Balthazar Edison at that point, or Edison Balthazar or whatever. In response to the criticism that I had in the TNG episodes, I look forward to more of these episodes because the thing they're going towards doesn't really interest me that much. Sure.
The stuff they're doing on the ship is a lot more interesting, and I think this show, in its serialized nature, earns that. Whereas on TNG, it was always just a plot device.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. Next comment is Cardinal Doomsday says, I call this the green episode because everyone is jealous of everyone else. There's this tiny little Xindi plot with this very sunburned Suliban-looking creature, which is sadly overwhelmed by T'Pol getting jealous of Trip and the female Mako, who we will never see again after this episode. Oh, interesting.
That's a bummer.
Malcolm wanting to know if Trip and T'Pol are getting it on, and even stupider, Malcolm thinking Hayes is trying to steal his position as defense chief. I laughed aloud when Archer tells Hayes and Reed to stop acting like 5-year-olds, given he was willing to destroy a population for making his dog sick. 2 detached retinas out of 5.
Seriously, if this was Star Trek Discovery, they would at least have the balls to do those 2 storylines where it's Trip and T'Pol kind of doing whatever, and Reed and Hayes, and the 2 that end up having sex are Reed and Hayes. I would give it a standing ovation if they did that.
A Latte Librarian says, Harbinger, this episode is T'Pol character assassination by the writers. Star Trek often doesn't pass the Bechdel test. Oh, here we go. But this is more annoying than usual since they could have made so many other more interesting choices. 2 out of 5.
Would you say this is character assassination of T'Pol?
No, I think we touched on this incidentally before. I don't think that they're targeting her for stupidity because I feel the whole plot is stupid. I think that's my defense. It's stupid in a childish, juvenile way, you know, which I think that they're holding Trip to. I think they're holding the female Mako to it. So T'Pol is acting in character of how this plot is supposed to work. And you can argue that it's juvenile and you don't like it, but I feel it's almost intentionally done that way. It's supposed to feel that way. And so I don't hold it against her. I don't think T'Pol acts out of character or anything.
Yeah, and maybe I'm not giving her enough credit, but I do like the idea of a younger Vulcan.
Yeah.
Who maybe doesn't have the same handle on things that a Spock does, or a.
I wish they had verbalized that more. I wish that was more of her character, because they don't really play it that way. But I would agree with you that, especially in a prequel series, I think a young Vulcan learning how to gain control over her emotions would be a solid character to have on this prequel series.
A young Vulcan trying to learn to control her emotions and completely failing at it by falling in love with one of her crewmates. Maybe when you put it that way, not the most empowering story for a female Vulcan character.
That's the movie Star Trek 11 that we've all been waiting for. Let's see. I think that's it. I don't find it too troubling for T'Pol, I guess. There have been worse episodes for T'Pol, I would say.
Sure, yes, definitely, yes.
Yeah. Royo says, Harbinger, the Enterprise faces off against some kind of interdimensional alien who can walk through walls and ignores energy weapons. When the alien sticks his hand in an antimatter reactor, the security chief and the Mako soldier conclude that they should mess with the reactor controls to reverse the polarity of the plasma coils to cause a feedback pulse. Why does the security chief and Mako know how to operate a warp core, and why does a feedback pulse affect this alien when it's immune to physical attacks and energy weapons? The very next episode will draw attention to the fact that the ship's doctor isn't qualified to operate a warp core and shouldn't even be touching the controls without 4 years of Starfleet training. At least Archer, if finally making some sense in this episode when he chews out Reed and Hayes, being angry when it's appropriate to be angry and displaying actual leadership skills. 2.5 out of 5.
You must be a blast at parties.
my counter to the plot idiocy is not really a counter, but none of that. It's what we said earlier. None of that plot makes sense. None of the Xindi alien plot makes sense. So him sticking his hand in the oven and getting burnt when they turned the heat up a little bit more didn't bother me too much. I did laugh when they CGI'd him getting like shot out of it and he lands on the ground.
Yes.
That's it. I think that's the last comment, actually. Yeah, there's only 6. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts about Harbinger. Patreon.com/ThePensky File if you want to leave your thoughts and comments about upcoming episodes. Become a patron. It's the best way to do it. It's the only way to do it. Clay, when are you going to give this one? I'm sensing you might go high on this. Is there any reason or any way that I should talk you down? What do you actually think? What are you going to give this one?
I think I'm going to give this one a 4.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's the most enjoyable episode for me I've watched all season. And like, I can't discount that. Like it does feel like they're going to the well of sitcom tropes for it, but it's like it's just giving it this boost in a way that I feel like the show really needs, of like, let these characters do something.
Yeah. Let
them engage with each other. Let them tell a story with this stuff that you've put on the table here. It's like spending 3 hours giving all your G.I. Joes weapons and then deciding that you don't want to play anymore. It's like, let them play.
Yeah, I'd agree. I feel my rating is impacted here because I kind of want to reward this episode at the end of the season. Like, I want to remember it, and I feel that the score is the only way to do it. My argument against being a 4 would be that it feels to me it's a 4 that is the context of knowing what the series is. Because if I showed this to someone, I think they would go, what the hell is this episode? This is bizarre. Like, what a strange episode of Star Trek this is. That's my only problem. And I do think it has flaws in it in some ways, but I do feel I'm going to give it a strong 3, which doesn't really mean anything in our rating system, but I do think it's a really good indication of what I think the show should have been doing from the start in some ways, which is, again, just melodrama, WB type storylines like this, I think are actually kind of fun in this series. And it gives it a really unique attitude compared to the other Star Treks at this point, where humanity is juvenile at this point, and these stories are kind of silly, and it's a lot of junior high love stories going on. But I think that just thematically matches what this prequel series is supposed to be. So I'll give it a 3, but I respect your 4. And I think it's an episode worth remembering going forward. So hopefully we do.
Yeah, I do think this one it's definitely a context dependent 4 for me, where it's like, would I say this is in the top 20 episodes of Star Trek you need to see before you do? No, I would not. But but for this show And this season specifically, I think this is one of the more enjoyable episodes.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the 4 is a good call. I'll give it a 3 though, just to balance this out. And but I would recommend people watch this one, or I wish that the show could have. I don't know what the show does, but I would hope that the show goes more in this direction. It is written by Manny Koto, who becomes the showrunner in season 4, so we'll see. But anyway, that's it. Thank you very much, guys, for supporting the show. I give it a 3. Harbinger a 3. Clay gives it a 4. You can support the show at patreon.com/The Penske File if you're so inclined. All the other shows are continuing. Clay, you have anything you want to say?
I think probably Invisible Man will be out from Rotten Horror Picture Show at this point.
Yeah, and you'll have another badass too, I think, actually.
Yep. We'll have the second episode. Our order this year for this season for Badass is a little bit weird because the DVD order does not match the production order or something. I can't exactly remember, but we're going off the way that they're listed on Wikipedia.
Okay.
Which is, whatever. That's just the way we're doing it.
Yeah.
And that'll be Cold Comfort and Never Fear, the return of Scarecrow. Scarecrow now voiced by Jeffrey Combs.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Got a big makeover for season 4. And we've got the next Rotten Horror Picture Show will be Audition, the Japanese horror movie. Which,
interesting.
Yeah, I'm very excited about talking about. Fantastic movie.
What's that ranked at?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I feel like it's fairly high.
Fairly high. Yeah, that makes sense.
And this month, being June, we are doing Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, on our Patreon coverage of the Friday the 13th series.
Yep. Whole bunch of stuff on Patreon. Battlestar Galactica, Friday the 13th, Part 6.
Audition is number 164. It's actually lower.
That's low. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a long time. I remember being disturbed by it.
Yeah, great movie.
Yeah, so you guys can listen to that on Rotten Horror. And now they have little tags, so I can easily say you can go to thepenskyfile.com/Rotten Horror, or you can go to thepenskyfile.com/Badass for those 2 podcasts. And that's it. Cool. Guys, thank you very much for listening. The next episode in Star Trek, I think, is Hatchery is the next episode. No, Doctor's Orders is the next episode. So the Phlox one. We'll be back in a week with Doctor's Orders. See ya.